Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Super Wall Jump, a podcast where we interview content creators and video game consumers and everything in between. Today, with me, I have.
Vedant Akhauri.
All right, Vedant, what are we going to be talking about today?
Today we are talking about Max Payne.
Fantastic. So, this is going to be another one of our deep dive episodes where we go deep into what a series is and the effect that it's sort of had on the broader gaming landscape. But first off, Vedant, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. So, I'm a podcaster, I'm a video professional, and I'm also an author. And I'm talking about Max Payne on here because Max Payne has had such an impact on my life as both a person and a creative. I'm a writer, like I said, and one of the crime novels that I published was very directly inspired by the Max Payne series. And I'm currently working on a screenplay for a short film that's inspired by the second Max Payne game. And I hope to get that made with producers and start filming that someday, better sooner than later. But I am in talks with producers right now. So, yeah, I'm very, very excited to talk about Max Payne with you because I've been a huge diehard fan of this series for a good 13 years now.
Makes sense. For those of us who don't really know anything about Max Payne, what is Max Payne? Who is Max Payne? Why is Max Payne?
So Max Payne is a neo-noir video game series from 2001 to 2012, and it's about a detective named Max Payne. So spoilers, basically, his wife and daughter get murdered in the first game, and he goes down a revenge quest, and it's very heavily inspired by like noir story elements and archetypes. So Max is like that grisly detective, but it's a much smarter game than just noir. Like it deconstructs the genre a lot and it plays with them really well. I think the second one, especially with the femme fatale love interest, Mona Sachs, they're obviously archetypes, but the archetypes are just a starting point, and they're really their own characters. And the third one is the one that I'm the most familiar with. That's how I got into the series about uh, 13 or so years ago, and that one is a very deep much a deconstruction of the noir genre, and it switches from like 1950s Sin City style noir into like digital noir. So that was really interesting, and I've been replaying the trilogy from start to end for my projects that I talked about, and I just feel like it's one of those games that people know about, but it's not like, a Call of Duty or an Uncharted, like it's definitely one of those more niche titles that is like but at least the first two games are called classics. And so I think they're like, some of the greatest video games ever made and very important in how we now intersect storytelling with gameplay that wasn't as common back when the first two games came out, but are now common feature. And I feel like Max Payne was really a trendsetter for that intersection.
The short version is Max Payne is a third person shooter that was released by Remedy, 1, 2, and 3. Sam Lake, who, well, if you know anything about Remedy, you've probably heard of Sam Lake, wrote the first two
Mhm.
games, and the third game was written by Rockstar Games' Dan Houser.
Yeah, and I feel like you can like if you've played the first two games and then you play the third game, you can definitely notice a huge difference in what feels like Sam Lake noir and what feels like Rockstar noir and Dan Houser noir. It's very, very different.
And it's also important to point out that Rockstar is also is also the publisher that makes Grand Theft Auto.
Hmm.
So them taking over this game, well, they took over the game, and their Max Payne is the one that ended the franchise. So
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, like, I think somebody who worked for Remedy, like a few years ago, they tweeted about how the original plan was for there to be four Max Payne games from Remedy. So it would play like through the season. So the first game was winter, then the second game is literally the fall of Max Payne, and then the third game would be summer, and I presume the fourth game would be spring. And it's just really interesting, how changing developers can really, change the direction of a franchise. And I heard that the original plan was, oh, the third game's going to be in Russia, or maybe that Max was going to take on the military. But then Rockstar decided to move the setting to Brazil instead. And I think they had to go through like three or four rewrites. So, yeah, very, very different. And you can really notice that if you play the first two and then the third one.
Yeah, it should be pointed out that Max Payne 1 came out in 2001. Max Payne 2 came out in 2003. Max Payne 3 came out in 2012. So that is a
Mhm.
9-year gap between them, which anyone who's familiar with development knows 9 years is a long time. Well,
Yeah.
I guess you don't really need to be fluent in development to know that. You just need to be a human person. And then you can know 9 years is a long time to do anything. So one of the things that Max Payne was also famous for was its use of something called bullet time. Do you know what bullet time is, Vedant?
Yeah, and I actually didn't know about Max Payne, before I knew about Bullet Time. Like there was this video game that I played when I was a kid called Total Overdose. My best way to describe it is it's Mexican Grand Theft Auto, and that used bullet time. And then I played the Fear games a little bit as a kid, and I think they had slow motion too. And then, like, years and years later, when I played Max Payne 3, I was like, "Oh, that's where bullet time comes from. That's where it originated from in gaming." So, yes, very familiar.
Yes, bullet time was the thing that Max Payne sort of introduced, which, similar to the Matrix, time gets slowed down so you can react relatively more quickly to stuff like bullets and also have more time for aiming and all of that. It's fun. It's cool. It meant that you could do even cooler things in the game when it came to running and gunning. Say you wanted to dive into a room and shoot everyone before you hit the floor, you could do that. And that was one of the main selling points of Max Payne was, oh hey, it makes you feel cool.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. You point out the Matrix. So, like this, the first game came out, like you said, in 2001, and that was around the time when video games were starting to experiment with, trying to integrate like these film-like moments into video games. And I think they started that with like Resident Evil that came out in the mid 90s, and there are a few other video games like that. But like pulling that off, like cinematic feeling was very hit or miss. And so I just love the bullet time in this, how it's able to really make you feel like you're in a John Woo movie. You slow down time and you kill a bunch of bad guys. And that's just what makes it so fun is just, seeing how he can, do bullet time and shoot dodge. And it's just a lot of fun. And that's one of the reasons why I still play it to this day.
Can you tell us more about John Woo, the guy that you mentioned?
Yeah, so John Woo, I don't know too much about him, but I think he was a figurehead in Hong Kong cinema. So that's where you get a lot of like you jump into a room, there's slow motion, there's over the top action with guns. So like if somebody shoots, then a bullet won't just hit something; it will hit something, and that thing will fly or explode in the air. And there's slow motion dives, all of that. So when they made the first Max Payne game, a lot of the inspiration they got from sorry, when they made the first Max Payne game, they had two sources of inspiration. First is Humphrey Bogart's style of noir and Hong Kong action movies like John Woo. So they kind of meshed those two together, and that's where we got this iconic signature visual, shorthand for what a Max Payne game should look and feel like.
Yeah, John Woo is who most people ascribe the art of gun fu to.
Yes.
If you don't know what gun fu is, listener, you can simply think what if you added guns to kung fu? So a lot of the stuff going on in the Matrix, a lot of stuff going on in a lot of like 2000s action movies, and also a good deal of John Wick. It can be attributed to John Woo's particular style of what if you combined gunplay with martial arts and made everything look really cool. And well, it does look really cool. And Max Payne is a series that saw that and then was like, what if we help make this into games? And took it and ran with it.
Yeah, definitely. And you notice that with the second game, especially where you can, shoot a bad guy and he doesn't just topple, like he flies into the air if you shoot him in like rapid fire. Like it's funny, but it's ragdoll physics that just so entertaining to watch. You feel like you're in an action movie.
Yeah. And, I think that's kind of important. Another thing that's interesting about Max Payne is I know at least the first game, instead of having traditional animated cutscenes, which is what most people are used to now, they had like comic book pages in order to tell the story.
Yeah, I do remember looking into that, and it was for two reasons, like aesthetic reasons, like it just felt because noir a lot of times feels like a comic book. And so I feel like they wanted to, pay homage to that, but also because this was a time when 3D cutscenes were still in their infancy, around the mid 90s when they started trying that. They were not there yet, and so for practical reasons, yes, they went with a comic book style. They kept it, in the second game, just for consistency. But the second game, the comic books look so breathtakingly beautiful, and then the third game tried something in between, like a motion comic panel, which I'm so and so about. But yes, that's a signature of the first game.
I mean, really, that just tells me that Rockstar didn't really know what they were doing with the Max Payne IP.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Rockstar. They made a lot of my favorite games, but I really feel like, in the long term that, them buying the rights to Max Payne was I mean, financially, it made sense, but artistically it kind of, shackled the series and took it in a direction that a lot of people didn't like, especially with the third game. And I know even with the second game, I heard that they had to like rush the game out for 2003, and that's why it feels so short compared to the first game.
Yeah. And also, notably, in 2013, Rockstar released Grand Theft Auto 5. So, literally 1 year prior, they had released Max Payne 3, which I don't personally think that Max Payne fits with Rockstar's house style. Because
Oh
something
no.
I've noticed with all of GTA games is there's a lot of tongue in cheek humor. But Max Payne is a game where your wife and child are killed and then you are framed for murder. And it's a very intense, noir story. And I don't think that's necessarily if Rockstar was going to do that in their mainline series GTA, they most likely would do it in a sort of, offhanded, tongue-in-cheek kind of way where they do it a little bit sarcastically.
Yeah, I agree with you that the third game just doesn't like a lot of people have criticized it because it feels like it's one of the best shooters ever made, I would say, but it doesn't feel like a Max Payne game. That's what a lot of people say. And you're right in that the writing is different. Like, they have these really cool ideas of, classism and, like rich versus poor and Max being this white savior of, the Brazilian community. And of course, Max's spiral into alcoholism. And it's not even like, that he's, in pain or like he got the closure in the second game. The third game is more so like, okay, I got the closure, I got the bad guy. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. I think that's really mature of them because not a lot of games talk about that. But yeah, there's so much profanity in there, and like Max just throws f bombs so much, and there's just so much gore, which is beautiful to look at. But It feels like a Grand Theft Auto game in some regards more than a Max Payne game, and also this the switching locations to Brazil, and I mean, I understand they wanted to change things up, but I just don't it just feels like such a far stretch from the first 2 games. I feel the writing especially feels like such a tonal shift, and also just the way they write Max. I'm very mixed about that. Like, I just don't feel like this is a natural progression. I mean, alcoholism and depression, yes, but for him to end up here in Brazil, like, you just have to really suspend your disbelief for the choices and the actions that he takes in the 3rd game for you to roll with that. So I definitely agree with you on that. That it feels like a Rockstar game, but not so much a good Max Payne game.
Yeah, again, their house styles, Remedy's house style and Rockstar's house style are very different. I do think
Yes.
Rockstar does have the capacity to tell like gripping down to earth stories, such as like Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. Those are good games. Uh, but Max Payne is meant to be kind of dark, and again, going from New York to Brazil suddenly, and he's doing something completely different. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it feels a bit like retrospectively as a soft reboot.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're gonna try and make Max Payne into the new Call of Duty by putting him in a new location and having him do something completely different now, but
Yeah.
still at the same time being afraid to do anything truly different, because it's still like, oh hey, well, we need to uncover a conspiracy and I need to kill a bunch of people and cool.
I agree. And I also feel like, like, again, spoilers, but the reason for why he moves to Brazil just feels so out of character. Like, he just shoots somebody at a bar. And I mean, the guy he shot was, being a jerk and all. He was a bad person. But then, like, Max moves to Brazil in the name of self-preservation because somebody puts a hit job on him. But I'm like, so Max Payne took out like half of the New York mafia, but one hit job attempt and he's out of here. Like, that just doesn't feel like Max Payne to me.
Yes, again, Max Payne 1 and 2, you are basically fighting the entire city
Hmm.
all of the time. I don't think that Max Payne would be like, "Oh, someone wants me dead? Wow, that's very unique and interesting. That's never happened before. No one has ever wanted me dead in the past."
Yeah, and I feel like, they added those New Jersey levels. I mean, my theory is that they got a lot of backlash because they changed so many things, and so it was some kind of a middle ground to old players. Like, okay, we're gonna have some of this take place in New Jersey and most of it in Brazil, but I feel like the issue is that the New Jersey levels are really cool. They have really cool callbacks, but then it like like he's up against the DeMarcos, like the father and then the son that he killed. Like, that feels like a 3rd game, and a lot of people have said that that would have been really interesting, where now it's Max on the run because he killed somebody's family. And so a lot of people say that the 3rd game should have been that, and then maybe a 4th game should have been Brazil. Like, to me, the 3rd game feels like a 4th or a 5th game. Like, there's just way too much that happened between 2 and 3 for this to feel like a 3rd game. And if you've read the comics too, like the Max Payne 3 comics, there's just so much that they just gloss over the 9-year gap, that I just feel like there's just so much in that 9-year gap that should have been the 3rd game, you know, instead of this game that we got.
It feels a bit like a wasted opportunity, but you
Hmm.
know, well, welcome to game development. What can you say about the level design of Max Payne?
Which one?
Any of them, just the
Okay.
series as a whole.
So I really like the level design of Max Payne 1. It feels very like claustrophobic, but this is the very first game. It came out in 2001. So I mean, it looks good, like atmospherically it's good, but it has aged like milk. And so some of them can be like an eyesore. And the controls can be very hard, especially during the nightmare sequences where you're walking on that trail of blood and jumping from a platform of a blood trail to another. Like it's so hard to control. And so like sometimes the game is just unplayable to me. Although I really do like the levels that they have, but I think a lot of people can agree that the dock level is filler. It doesn't need to be there.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second game, I really love the second game, and I love how at the start it's Max and Mona at the manor, and then Max at the hospital, and then Max investigating the cleaners at the warehouse. I love how it plays with chronological stuff here, and I feel like that also with switching between Max and Mona's perspective, kind of adds length to the game and adds perspective, but I do feel like the second game is way too short. Like I feel like we're just getting to the start of Max and Mona's relationship, and then it just ends. I don't like that about the game, and I'm really hoping that the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes that are about to come out do help flesh out some of the stuff that they just didn't have time for in 1 and 2. The third game, I love the levels, but way too many cutscenes. It just breaks the immersion for me, especially in the stadium level, in the first favela level where Max is walking around, hoping to find Fabiana. And his goal is, find Fabiana, but his strategy is just walk around the favelas and look for some kind of a sign. I don't like that, but the third game does have a lot of really awesome levels. Like I really do love the airport one. Like I think a lot of people consider that one of the best, levels in the entire franchise. I love that one, and I love the police station one, and I love the graveyard one too. And I really do like the one where you're trying to escape the favelas during the Ufe raids. I love that because there's so much tension, and I really love the music in the third game with Health. They're fantastic, and that really adds to the atmosphere for the third one, and why I love those so much. But story-wise, some of the levels just feel pointless. Like we have Max and his partner Passos, go to the docks to find Fabiana, and nothing. Like she slips out of their grasp, and there's no lead, no, oh, we can go here next. So it just feels completely pointless. And same for the stadium level. Cool idea, but nothing really comes of it. So I really feel like they could have cut some levels or just made them feel more impactful. But the third game, like I said, the cutscenes are way too intrusive, and it really feels like they were trying to make a movie instead of a game.
Yeah, because, it borrows from noir elements often, but the thing about that is that it's still a game, and games are an interactive medium. You can try and copy Kojima, but I don't think most people should try and copy Kojima. He stands out for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Like I understand that, back then I hear they use the cutscenes to disguise the loading screens, but still I should not be, going through a level and then have to sit through a cutscene just to go through a corridor. Like it gets really annoying sometimes.
You'd think at the end of the day they would have smoothed it all out, especially if they had 9 years to make Max Payne 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So, would you say Max Payne has had like ripple effects on the industry as a whole since it came out?
Oh, definitely. Like we talked about bullet time at the very beginning. Like pretty much every shooter today has bullet time as a superpower, pretty much, and a lot of that comes from Max Payne. So we see this in like Total Overdose, that game I talked about. We see this in Fear, and I'm sure we see this in some of the Call of Duty games. I'm sure, but I wouldn't be surprised. And we also see this in Remedy's other games. Like I think Control has bullet time in some regard, and it's just very influential in that. But I also feel like it was influential from a cinematic storytelling perspective, in that the first game came out when they were just trying to figure out how to make video games feel like movies, and there's a term for this, filmification. And
Mhm.
like this began in the mid 90s when they were trying to make 2D games, 3D during that jump, but Max Payne really, with the action scenes, with the gun fu, and also the over the top noir stylized storytelling. I feel like that really showed that gaming can really be a writer's medium. And so it's really influential in that regard, bullet time and storytelling and how to make video games feel like you're watching and also playing a movie.
Yeah, but the problem is again is that for certain movies are not an interactive medium.
Yeah,
They give you a story and then you sort of react to it. And when you try and bring interactivity into it, it's always the question of how much interactivity should the player have? And you can look at something sort of like the Uncharted series, which from 2 on really understood, okay, cool. We need a bunch of really cool set pieces, and then we can really help set the tone. And then it feels like we're, watching a movie. We're just getting to play in a movie. But that's also because, from what I remember of the Uncharted series, most things in that series, it flows pretty well from action to cutscene and vice versa.
I
Because
agree.
all the cool stuff does not happen just when you are in a cutscene. And not all the boring stuff also happens in a cutscene. They try to have a balance.
Definitely, yeah. I think that, I love Uncharted personally, but I feel like even Uncharted fell into this sometimes where Uncharted 3 feels like they had these really cool set pieces, like around with the pillars, the deserts, and also the ship. And then they wrote the plot around it second because it does feel a little disjointed. And so there are definitely times, even in, masterpieces like the Uncharted series, where it falls into that risk of we're thinking of this as a spectacle first and a game second.
That kind of reminds me of Marvel movies, because
Hmm.
many Marvel movies these days, they do the pre-visualization for all of the big set piece moments first, and then they tell directors, "Okay, cool, make a movie that has this in it." And that's part of why the Marvel movies have fallen off in the past few years, because that's become more and more and more apparent. There's less and less justification for something like Multiverse of Madness, which I can only describe as Calvin Ball, but a movie.
Hmm.
It's just a
Yeah.
lot of like, all right, cool. We had some really cool ideas, but we didn't have anything to put them together. Oh, look at all these cool flashing lights. Isn't this great? It's like,
Yeah.
no, I want a story here.
Yeah, like how many times can we have a superhero movie climax have a big shooting beam in the sky, you know?
Cool. I think of the end of WandaVision, where it was literally just a Dragon Ball Z fight where they were throwing orbs at each other. That's cool, I guess. That's not particularly interesting. And I feel like designing around set pieces is not the way to make anything interesting, really. A lot of the most interesting pieces of media are the ones where, like, yeah, a lot of stuff happens and then we have to sit in it. We have to sit and we have to think about what just happened, and giving games and other media just room to breathe is important.
I agree.
It's one of the reasons why people love the shawarma scene from Avengers, because yes, man, that was a bunch of crazy stuff that happened. And now you get to see them and see the main characters and be like, wow, they are tired.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that helps establish a rhythm and it helps establish these characters as people. It's why I'm one of the very few people that likes Iron Man 3, because it treated Tony Stark as a human being with emotional problems and not a guy who can snap his fingers and then make technology happen.
I also love I mean, I understand, with the Mandarin portrayal why people don't like that, but yeah, I love Iron Man 3 for that same reason because you get breathing room, you get to know the people, as characters instead of just part of a big set piece.
Yeah. But do we get that in Max Payne? Do we ever get like actual downtime in the games to really get an understanding of who Max is when he's not running and gunning?
I feel like more so in the first few games. Like what I love about Max Payne 2 is uh, how interactable the environments are. So if you look at Max's apartments, you see like these clues like of his there's like a picture of his wife there, but you also see how he has the bed made, but everything else just looks like he moved in here 5 years ago and never bothered to, unpack basically. And then you see the funhouse level in Max Payne 2, and that tells a lot of storytelling, about like linearity and all that cool stuff. And also, you're at the police station and you get to see these characters just be characters and you get to like listen in on their conversations. And I feel like that feels a lot more lived in and like you're just vibing there. Like it feels more like a hub more so than just an action set piece, and that's something that Max Payne 3 was missing, where it just took away control way too many times, and you still had characters like what Captain Baseball Bat Boy, and some of those other things show up in like the TV stuff, but if you were stalling and wanted to explore the environment for even like a few seconds, then Max would nag you, or Passos would nag you, or Giovanna would nag you. And Max Payne 3 also feels like a very, very linear game, like overly linear. And once you go to the next, sub level, like part of a level, you can't go back. So you don't really get to explore things. And so I feel like the first two games, yes, definitely. You get that breathing room and get to see the characters, through their environments and through these hubs. But the third game, it is very, very linear and very fast paced, but you don't really get to settle down as much.
Yes, and that's one of the things that Remedy is very good about. For all the time in their games like Alan Wake and Control that you spend time going around causing a ruckus, you are also getting quieter moments where you just sort of explore a space. And that space will usually tell you a lot about what's going on in the world. I think of Control, how you can go, there's a mailroom level where you can just go through and read a bunch of lost letters or letters that got redacted. And they're not even gameplay related, but it just adds a lot of depth to the world. And they're completely optional. You don't have to do them at all. You just got to go from point A to point B, but you can stop and watch little videos and read little text boxes and drink in the world some more. And I think that's one of Remedy's greatest strengths as a studio.
I definitely agree. Yeah, Remedy is very good at establishing worlds with like Alan Wake or Control in the first two Max Payne games. And I love this in video games like Uncharted 4. Like it feels like a very like reflective, slower paced, introspective one. Like when you're exploring like Nate's house or just the environments, you get these clues and also Nate's journal. It's so, so cool when video games do that, and I really wish that a third game did that like its predecessors did.
Yeah, cool. Has Max Payne, for example, picked up knitting for like 5 minutes? Listen, it wouldn't really matter, but something like that would tell you a lot about his character. Hey, who is he when he's not running and gunning? Is kind of important. It doesn't necessarily change or break the game, but when a character feels like a full person, you can empathize with them more and you're more invested in their story.
I agree.
So if they made a Max Payne 4, what would you like to see in it?
Okay, so I would like them to return the story to New York, first of all.
Mhm.
And something, I mean, this is more so like maybe more fan fiction than something that they could actually do, but a lot of people, there's a theory out there that there are two endings to Max Payne 2. The first is where Mona dies, and the second one where she survives. And the third game doesn't explicitly confirm what happened to Mona. Like even at the graveyard level, they have like Winterson and of course, his wife and daughter, and they have I think Vinny Gagnetti's there too. I think, but Mona's tombstone is missing And so a lot of people theorize that, well, they don't explicitly say what happened to Mona, so maybe a fourth game could have him reunite with her. But I definitely want them to return to New York City for the fourth one. Like no Brazil, no, I mean, maybe Passos could tag along with Giovanna, but no, I would love for a fourth game to return to what made the series special, and of course that would be very hard to do, because James McCaffrey, the voice of Max Payne, he passed away a few years ago. So I don't know how they would do that. Or maybe a Max Payne 4 could be like an interquel between the second and third games to kind of flesh out the characters, or maybe a prequel in between one or two, just something. Because the thing that I really don't like about the third game is that there was so much setup from one and two that three just discards entirely. Like the cleaners are not mentioned, and Jim Bravura gets killed off, and Mona is left ambiguous. Like I know canonically she's dead, but they don't explicitly say it in the game. So some people think that the ending where she lives is canon. They consider that canon, but there's just so much that one and two set up that I really feel like they just left on the table. And so I love the fourth game. If they're able to somehow make it without James McCaffrey, like using his old recordings or recasting somebody who sounds very similar, just return to one and two and tie up any loose ends or branch off the first two games, because the third game from a plot standpoint just really feels like an outlier.
Yeah. It again, because it takes place 9 years after the second game. It came out 3 years after the second game. It
uh, nine
and it
years.
doesn't yeah, 9 years. So it doesn't quite mesh with everything else. But I do think that it could be cool to see Remedy do a more modern take on Max Payne. Simply because some of the games that we've seen come out from Remedy recently, such as Control, Max Payne, Alan Wake 2. I've been saying Max Payne so many times, it's just stuck in my mouth now.
Yeah,
Um, and the most recent one, FBC Firebreak, which have had a FBC Firebreak had a lot of focus on just gunplay and making sure it felt good to play. I never played it myself, but that was something that I saw a lot of, was people being like, "Wow, like this feels good to play." But the problem was they didn't have enough content for it, allegedly. So I'm interested in seeing what they would do now with their more modern engine, improved writing, and just more time and money to spend on making Max Payne really sing.
I agree, but it also depends on finances, because like the first game was a huge hit, but the second game I heard sold less than half of the first game. And then I read somewhere that the third game was, at least at the time it came out, one of the most expensive games ever made at a little over $100 million, because you had to, bring in all these studios and do all these rewrites, and also it's Rockstar. And so it didn't pay off as much as they were hoping. So I feel like the remake of the first and second game might be them testing the waters, but it really depends on, like, do they see a path forward? Depending on how the first two games do, and if that increases potential interest in a Max Payne 4. Because I think I read somewhere an article that that is what they might be doing, is that they're remaking the first two to gauge interest for a fourth one. So I would love to see that happen. And yeah, like if they're able to, tie it together, then that'd be really cool. Like tie it together to the first two games. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be nice. And also, I know Remedy is currently hurting financially. FBC Firebreak did not perform as well as they had hoped. It sold somewhat okay, but not nearly as much as they were expecting, especially for a game that seems like it was supposed to be live service. Where, live service games, either they go big or they go home.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that Max Payne, the remakes, will be able to help get Remedy back on its feet, and then I can finally get the Control sequel that I've wanted for years.
Hmm.
By
Let's
God,
go.
I'm ready.
I'm ready for the remakes to come. Like I've been waiting like 3 years since they announced the remakes. Like I've waited so long. I just want to play the game. Like I'll pay 100, I'll pay 200. Just give me my Max Payne remakes.
Yeah. But with that, is there anything else you'd like to mention about Max Payne before we wrap this up?
Yeah, so like I said, Max Payne has really influenced my life and also my creative projects. Um, so I am a writer, and one of my books is very directly influenced by the Max Payne series. It's a book called Mrs. Kill on Booksy.com. That's Booksie. My best way to describe it is that it's like a combination of Spider-Man and Max Payne. That's the best way I can describe it right now. Um, and I'm also working on a short film script. Like I'm still talking to producers, but it's very much inspired by the second game, like the love story between Max and Mona, but a lot more modern and in a corporate setting. So if that ever comes out, then you can just look me up and find the film if it ever gets made. Um, and one other really important thing I want to mention is that the third game, it had a lot of personal impact on people because in the third game, like he's a very severe alcoholic, and a lot of people, like I've seen YouTube like essays about Max Payne 3, and people have said that playing the third game helped them quit alcohol addiction because they saw what it did to Max, and they saw that that scene where Max quits drinking and shaves his head was very inspiring to them. That kind of helped them, push themselves past their addictions to alcoholism. So I feel like the third game, is kind of a mess, storytelling wise, but in terms of maturity and how it depicts addiction is very powerful and mature for a game. So, like definitely check out the third game. So like I think it's still a good game. You just have to treat it like its own separate thing compared to the first two.
Because it's someone else's interpretation of, what Max Payne is as a series.
Yes, exactly. And I also have a podcast called Let's Talk Media with Vedant Akhauri, on which I talk about TV shows, movies, video games sometimes, and I interview a lot of like creatives similar to this podcast, where I talk to filmmakers, writers, directors, actors about their careers and if they have any actionable advice to anybody. So if it's okay to plug that in, then you can come check that out.
Yeah, be sure to check it out. And as always, listener, um, if you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. Please tell your friends. Please like, comment, subscribe. Is that something people are still saying? I
Like,
hope so.
comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.
Oh yeah, definitely hit the. If you're all listening on Spotify, find a notification bell and just hit that thing because that's definitely how that works.